Hey guys, tonight we descend into the dim, spice-scented streets of ancient Rome, where the flickering lamplight reveals more than just shadowy outlines. Imagine this. You're wrapped in a rough woolen cloak, your sandals sticky with amphora, juice from the market, and you're following a woman hood up. Footsteps light down a narrow alleyway behind a bakery. She knocks twice, then once more. A wooden panel slides open. An old man peers out, eyes gleaming, beard stained with something red. You step inside, and the air thickens. The scent hits you: rosemary, burnt honey, and... is that crushed oyster? Shell, you've come to buy a love potion. You think it's for seduction. The law says it's attempted murder. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're joining from somewhere across the globe, drop your location and the local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't know it yet, but this vial in your hand, milky, bitter smelling, wrapped in a scrap of linen covered in strange symbols, is a ticking bomb, not because it might fail, but because it might actually work. And in Rome, if you make someone fall in love with you unnaturally, if you mess with their free will, their honor, or their social status, you could be charged with veneficium. That word veneficium didn't just mean poisoning. It meant sorcery, enchantment, the art of influencing another's mind or body through unnatural means. And yes, that included herbs slipped into wine with the hope that your crush might blush harder when they look at you. Historians still argue whether the Romans truly believed in the power of these brews, or whether they simply feared what they represented: an invisible threat, a social cheat code, a break in the ritual of courtship and hierarchy. Now, you might think, come on, it's just a little aphrodisiac. Maybe some anise, a splash of vinegar, a few dried rose petals, powdered tiger testicle if you're fancy. But to the Roman elite, love potions weren't innocent. They were a threat to the foundations of power. Because Roman society was built on control: who married whom, who owed loyalty to whom, who inherited what. If someone could bypass that system with a pinch of powdered mandrake and a flirty smile, the entire house of cards risked collapse. That's why even whispers of potion use, especially among women, could land someone in serious trouble. You could lose your property, your freedom, your head. Still, the heart wants what it wants. And in Rome, the heart was rarely satisfied with what it was legally allowed to have. So people, especially women with no legal power of their own, turned to potions, and more dangerously, to the women who made them. These women, often former slaves or foreigners, operated in a liminal space between healer and criminal. One such woman was known only by the nickname Lucerna, which meant the lamp. She sold remedies by day: ointments for joint pain, teas for insomnia, but by night, she dealt in darker things. Whispers say she once gave a senator's wife a mixture of dried fig sap and belladonna, telling her it would make her husband crave only her. The next week, the man fell violently ill, hallucinating that his wife was the goddess Venus, and refusing to let anyone else touch him. He recovered, barely, but Lucerna vanished. You feel your fingers tighten around your own vial now. Are you really going to use this? You remember that boy from the bathhouse, how he laughed with his friends, not at you. You just want to be seen, to be chosen. That isn't evil, is it? Let's pull back the curtain a little more. One of the earliest recorded potion scandals in Rome involved the noble Iuli family. Yes, that Iuli of Caesar fame. A young woman, possibly a cousin, was accused of giving a soldier a potion that made him lose his sense of duty. The charge wasn't murder. It wasn't even theft. It was corruption, a word Romans held dearer than life itself. To corrupt someone's moral compass, even in the name of love, was seen as a spiritual crime. She was exiled to an island off the coast. No trial, no appeal, just gone. Sex, of course, played a big role in this paranoia. Roman culture prized control over desire, especially male desire. A Roman man was expected to conquer in all arenas: war, politics, and the bedroom. If he found himself suddenly obsessed, unhinged, or impotent, it couldn't be his own fault. Surely, some enchantress had gotten to him. And so the blame fell on women. Especially women who knew things. Herbs. The soft science of touch. There's a tale of a woman named Tullia, whose husband accused her of using potions to make him docile. In truth, she just started complimenting him more and refusing to argue. But that shift was enough to terrify him and the court. She was forced to publicly renounce witchcraft, though no potion was ever found. You reach your home, a rented room above a bakery that smells perpetually of burnt honey. You unwrap your purchase. It's heavier than you thought, greasy. You sniff it, and your nose wrinkles. This doesn't smell like love. It smells like wet parsley and crushed ants. You hesitate. Would you really put this in someone's drink? What if they fall in love, but not with you? What if it opens them to desire, but redirects it elsewhere? Historians still debate whether Roman love potions worked physiologically via mild toxins and aphrodisiacs or psychologically, exploiting suggestion and hope. Either way, the user had to believe. That was the real ingredient: faith or desperation. And so you sit by your oil lamp, vial in hand, caught between longing and legality. Somewhere outside, a cat yowls. Somewhere deeper in the city, someone else is doing what you're doing, holding a flask, whispering a name, hoping. But in Rome, love didn't always lead to marriage. Sometimes it led to madness, or exile, or the grave. The night is heavy now. The air sour with chimney smoke and the slow decay of overripe olives from the market square. You cradle the potion under your tunic like it's a stolen jewel, though it might as well be a live snake. It warms against your skin, maybe from your body heat, maybe from whatever oily nightmare is brewing inside. You're not the first to walk this line between hope and heresy, and definitely not the first to be caught. Just ask poor Amelia of the Uli, whose little detour into herbal persuasion nearly brought down one of Rome's oldest bloodlines. The story goes like this. A cousin of the Uli, wealthy, clever, unmarried at 23, which in Roman terms was basically elderly, fell head over sandals for a young cavalry officer named Gaius, who was beautiful in the way marble statues wish they could be. He had curls like polished bronze and a laugh that made even the horses pause. But he was engaged. Of course he was. Amelia, with her family's connections and a dowry the size of a small province, was used to getting what she wanted. So when Gaius politely declined her invitation to her villa's Saturnalia feast, she took it as a temporary problem, one she could fix. With help. Enter Cassina, an older woman with eyes like soot and fingers stained from grinding gods know what in a mortar. Cassina ran a bathhouse in Trastevere, but her side business was more lucrative, selling emotional teas to clients too discreet to use the word venenum. She gave Amelia a thick syrup made from poppy milk, crushed bee wings, and something she wouldn't name. Pour this into red wine, she said. Only once. Say his name while you stir. He will dream of you for 9 nights, and on the 10th, he will come. Amelia did as instructed. At the next banquet, she passed Gaius the spiked wine, watching his lips touch the cup as if it were her own skin. He drank, he smiled, he passed out, not from love, from convulsions. His servant claimed the boy began shouting about flames in his chest and a woman with iron teeth. The physicians came. He didn't die, but he didn't marry Amelia either. And within 2 days, the rumor had spread like oil on water. Amelia had tried to bewitch him. The Senate, never one to miss a chance at public theater, launched an investigation, not just into Emilia, but into every woman rumored to have ever bought so much as a dried fig from Cassina. By week's end, 27 women were named. Emilia was sentenced to exile in Corsica, where she supposedly took up writing erotic poetry under a fake name. Cassina disappeared. Some say she escaped to Antioch. Others think she was quietly strangled in the Tiber marshes. But the damage was done. Love, it seemed, could be as dangerous to the Republic as treason. You listen to this tale, perhaps told in a bathhouse by someone who insists they once knew the servant who saw it all, and you feel your stomach knot. Not with guilt, but with the sick twist of recognition. You know what it's like to want someone who sees right through you, to feel invisible, to ache with the kind of longing that doesn't go away when you close your eyes, but only gets louder in the dark. That's what makes love potions seductive, not just the promise of affection, but the illusion of control. You're not just waiting for someone to choose you. You're making it happen, even if it means bending fate with a teaspoon of madness. But the law didn't care about heartbreak. Roman courts grouped love potions with murder attempts because they worked on the same principle, altering a body against its will. If someone died, it was easy. Charge of poisoning. If they didn't die, but their behavior changed, if they became obsessed, irrational, or humiliated, then the charge was corruption of character. Still punishable, still scandalous. Historians still argue whether this harshness reflected real fear, or whether it was a way to police women's behavior in a society terrified of female autonomy. And speaking of scandal, there's one story that keeps resurfacing in dusty legal records and even racier pillow talk. A senator's wife, unnamed but nicknamed Vulpina, the little fox, was suspected of using a love spell not on a man but on another woman, a young widow who had inherited her husband's shipbuilding fortune. Vulpina hosted her frequently, gifted her lotions and embroidered tunics, and allegedly gave her a nightly drink to aid in sleep. After 2 months, the widow changed her will, leaving half her estate to Vulpina, calling her soulmate and companion. When this reached the family, all underworld broke loose. They accused Vulpina of sorcery, lesbian corruption, which in Roman legal terms meant something else entirely, and financial coercion. No one ever proved the potion existed, but witnesses claimed they saw her purchase odd items: crushed amber, vulture feathers, even a lock of the widow's hair. Vulpina was publicly shamed, stripped of status, and paraded through the forum in a donkey cart, a humiliating sentence, usually reserved for fake prophets and debtors that you press your fingers tighter around the vial. Maybe love potions don't always work, but maybe they don't have to. The idea that they might, that you tried, can be enough to unravel lives. Roman society was built on rules, rituals, and above all, appearances. If someone fell in love, too fast, too hard, or with the wrong person, people didn't ask if feelings were genuine. They asked who tampered with the system. Even the everyday language of love in Rome hints at this. The word amator, lover, was often used with suspicion, like schemer or manipulator. Real affection was meant to unfold slowly, within the confines of marriage, property, and legacy. Anything else, burning passion, irrational desire, obsession, was either the work of the gods or a potion. And gods, at least, had temples. Potions had casinas. You think of your crush, how he laughed with someone else yesterday, how he smiled briefly when you held the door, but didn't meet your eyes. You know this vial won't change everything. Maybe it won't change anything, but it feels like doing something. Like stepping into the role the city won't give you, a person with agency, with power. Still, you hesitate. Because deep down, you know, if it works, it's not real. And if it doesn't, you're still alone. And if you're caught, if anyone finds out, you won't just be pitied. You'll be feared. Because in Rome, love wasn't just a feeling. It was a weapon. You don't go home that night. Instead, you wander the quieter quarters of the Aventine, where the bakeries have stopped. Coughing out smoke and only the occasional whisper of sandals reminds you that Rome never sleeps entirely. Your hand still brushes against the vial from time to time, like it's checking if the danger is real or if you imagined the whole thing. But the weight is real. And the stakes get heavier with every story you recall, especially the one about a girl named Sylvana, barely 17, who fell for a grain merchant's son and ended up exposing a whole network of potion sellers that catered exclusively to the wives of senators. That's where the fear really lived, not in the market stalls or the whispered exchanges, but in the drawing rooms, behind closed doors, where the city's most powerful men were beginning to suspect they weren't in control of their own appetites. It started innocently enough. Sylvana's mother bought her a modest charm, just a strip of papyrus soaked in rosewater and saffron, tied with a red thread to be worn around the wrist. For confidence, the vendor claimed. The merchant's son, Lucius, noticed her. The next day, spoke to her, twice. For a girl used to being invisible in her own house, this was thunder. Encouraged, she went back for more. This time it was a paste fig jam mixed with dried violet petals and something that stung the tongue. Rub it on your lips, the vendor said. Then say his name before sunset. She did, and Lucius kissed her. So began the descent. What Sylvana didn't know was that her potion vendor was also supplying the wife of a prominent censor who, coincidentally, had started reciting love poems to a slave girl and forgetting Senate appointments. The dots connected fast, and when the authorities came knocking, Sylvana's name was on a list she didn't know existed. She'd been sold a series of increasingly complex concoctions, some possibly benign, others not so much. One included bat blood and was classified as a Class II veneficium agent. That's a technical way of saying black magic adjacent. The court took it very seriously. A young woman manipulating the behavior of Roman men, even by accident? That was a security issue. During the trial, one senator said, "If the girls of Rome can sway our sons with herbs and words, then no law is safe." Sylvana wasn't executed. She was too young, too sympathetic, and too obviously used, but she was banned from Rome and married off to a fishmonger in Ostia, where reportedly she lived a quiet life and never touched so much as a lavender sachet again. But her vendor? Not so lucky. She was paraded through the Subura wearing nothing but a linen shift and a sign around her neck that read, "Dealer in Forbidden Pleasures." They say her hair was shaved, her fingers broken, so she could no longer grind herbs. Rome didn't just punish the act. It punished the possibility. It crushed the tools of influence. You wonder what happened to the rest of her clients, the wives and widows, the mistresses and matrons. Surely they didn't all stop buying hope overnight. No, the market just went deeper underground. Because as long as Rome had marriages arranged for property and girls wed to men twice their age before they could read, there would always be someone trying to tilt the scales. Someone who looked at a man who didn't love her and thought, asterisk, just a little nudge, asterisk. And not just women. There were men too. Less often, yes, but still present in the scrolls, always lurking at the fringes. Young men trying to seduce older patrons. Freedmen hoping to gain favor. One scroll tells the story of a male dancer named Faustus, who was accused of using a potion to deepen affection from a senator who had taken an interest in him. Faustus swore it was just cinnamon mixed with honey and date pulp, common ingredients for sore throats. But the senator's son had seen him pour it into a cup with a muttered phrase. That was enough. Faustus was branded and sold to a quarry where he likely didn't dance again. You think of him now, this sharp sting of injustice hidden behind the taste of something sweet. It seems the city has no patience for love that comes with a recipe, and yet people still whisper recipes. They trade them like secrets at twilight. a pinch of myrrh for seduction, a splash of vinegar to wake the senses, carrot seed oil to increase longing. None of it is guaranteed. Most of it is placebo. But in a city where feelings are dangerous, even placebos can be revolutionary, especially when combined with sex. Let's talk about that. Because love potions weren't always about emotional attachment. Sometimes they were about pure animal lust. And in those cases, the line between healing and crime got even blurrier. Roman physicians like Galen and Dioscorides wrote about aphrodisiacs openly, sometimes recommending peppered wine or oysters, other times listing stranger concoctions like the marrow of a leopard or the boiled tongue of a crow. These were sold legally. But if you didn't have a beard and a medical scroll, those same ingredients could land you in jail. One tale tells of a courtesan named Sabina who swore by a mixture of celery, juice, and powdered staghorn. She offered it to clients not as a drink, but as a massage oil, rubbing it into their shoulders while whispering praise. Most thought it was erotic flair. One didn't. He got obsessed, followed her home, threatened her. When arrested, he claimed she had bewitched him, that her oil was unnatural, that his thoughts were not his own. Sabina was brought to court. They tested her oils, found traces of opium and a now extinct herb thought to dull inhibition. She claimed it was from muscle tension. The court disagreed. She was banned from practicing pleasure arts. Her name faded from records after that. The irony is brutal. A man behaves badly, and the woman is punished for his desire. A story as old as the Forum itself. You reach the edge of the Tiber now, where the water glints like dark glass and smells faintly of fish and regret. You lean against a worn pillar and stare at your reflection. What do you want, really? To be loved? To be remembered? To feel like you matter, even just for a night? The potion might offer you that. Or it might offer you a disaster. Because no matter how careful the recipe, you can't control the outcome. You can't bake affection like bread. Love, when real, is messy, slow, unpredictable. But potions promise shortcuts. And shortcuts always come with hidden tolls. Your hand drifts to the vial again. Somewhere in this city, someone else is holding theirs, whispering the name of someone they think they can't live without. And the city hums quietly. Around you, a living thing, watching, waiting, never judging, but always remembering. There's a house in the Esquilin district, quiet villa tucked between two loud bakeries, where a girl once opened a sealed jar meant for love and ended up burning her own skin. The contents weren't acid or fire or poison, just herbs. Dried hyacinth, clove dust, something that looked like shredded bark and smelled faintly of cinnamon and mildew. But when she touched it to her lips as instructed, her mouth swelled. Her eyes turned red. She screamed until her voice gave out. Her family said it was an allergic reaction. Her neighbors whispered it was punishment from Venus for forcing affection. But the girl, her name lost to records but remembered in gossip, confessed that she had wanted her friend to love her, a girl from another family, one who had braided her hair and laughed easily and never looked afraid. She wanted her, not in the way of men and marriage contracts, but in the hungry, unnameable way that only the gods and poets dared to describe. And so she sought help from an old woman in the Subura who sold feelings in jars. She didn't get love. She got a scar across her cheek and a warning scrawled on her bedroom wall by her father. Never trust a heart that needs help to beat. The city has 1,000 stories like that, all drifting in the air like incense from some broken altar. The scent pulls you forward now as you walk along a dark colonnade near the Temple of Vesta, where even the stones feel like they're watching. There's a smell here, floral, damp, sticky sweet like overripe pears. It's coming from a small alcove filled with offerings, petals, coins, and little bundles of wool soaked in wine. You see one with your own name scratched on it. Not your full name, just a nickname, a private one. Something only one person ever called you. Your skin tightens. You're not the only one dabbling in this game. Someone has been thinking about you. Someone has whispered your name in the presence of old gods. And suddenly, the power shifts. For weeks, you thought you were the hunter, the dreamer, the one teetering on the edge of sin for love. But now maybe you're the prey. You touch the bundle. It's damp. The wine's still fresh. Whoever left this did it recently. You glance around, but the colonnade is empty except for a stray cat licking its paw under a statue of Minerva. The thought curls around your ribs like ivy. Someone loves you enough to risk divine judgment, to break the law, to touch forbidden knowledge. Do you feel flattered? Afraid? A little of both? This is the truth of Roman love magic. It wasn't just about control. It was about vulnerability. Because to admit you need help to win someone's heart is already a confession of weakness. You are exposed. And exposure in Rome was as dangerous as war. That's why these potions were treated like weapons, because they revealed desperation. And in a world where strength meant everything, desperation was treason to your class, your gender, your name. And yet, the city was obsessed with these things. Love charms and sex spells show up everywhere, carved into amulets, etched into rings, even hidden inside clay figurines buried under doorsteps. One popular trick was the defixio tablet, a thin sheet of lead inscribed with a curse or plea, rolled tightly, then driven into the ground with a nail. These weren't subtle. They had instructions like bind Marcus's soul to mine, or make Flavia burn with longing every time she drinks water. Some were cruel. May he never find satisfaction unless it is with me, one reads. That one was found under the bed of a gladiator whose mistress was also his sponsor's wife. Historians still argue whether these tablets were ever meant to be seen, or whether their secrecy was the magic. Because if no one knew, how could the gods be offended? That's what makes Roman love potions so unique. They weren't always about visibility. Sometimes they were about hidden power, silent influence. A look, a taste, a whispered word under moonlight. And sometimes, all it took was suggestion. The belief that you'd been enchanted was enough to make you behave like you were. One senator's memoir mentions a colleague who stopped eating for a week because he believed his mistress had bewitched him with a hairpin dipped in goat blood. Turns out she had just rejected him. But the idea of a spell was easier to believe than his own bruised ego. You walk now through the garden of Lucullus, where the wealthy once sipped pomegranate wine and tried to impress each other with trained parrots and rare fruit. It's mostly ruins now, overgrown and humming with crickets, but you can imagine the parties, the laughter, the masks of civility hiding hunger. Somewhere among these gardens, they say, a Vestal virgin once met her lover. And not just any man, a general. A real Roman thundercloud, all armor and ambition. Their meetings were arranged by a servant who left fig leaves tied in twine on a certain bench. 1 leaf for danger, 2 for safe, 3 for tonight. But even fig leaves aren't immune to the wind. One night the signal was misread. The meeting happened, and a spy followed. The general claimed she had bewitched him. Said she laced his wine with something soft and seductive. She denied it. Said he had dreamed the whole thing. Her breath still smelled of rosemary, they said. She was buried alive 3 days later. Rome didn't care if the spell was real. Only if someone believed it was .n belief. That's the most powerful potion of all, more than any root or powder. Belief makes you look for signs. Belief makes you question your own mind. You think of the way your crush looked at you last week. Was it indifference, or was it hesitance? Had they felt the same flicker of interest, but buried it under Roman restraint? Were they waiting for you to act? Or had they sensed your plan and stepped away before the spell could take hold? You don't know. You'll never know. That's the curse. Potions don't guarantee love. They just infect your thoughts with maybe, and that's what keeps you up at night. Not guilt, not fear of the law, but the unbearable question. Asterisk, what if it worked? What if it could work? What if all that stood between you and being loved was the courage to try something dangerous? You reach into your tunic and pull the vial out again. The moonlight catches on the glass, revealing tiny flecks of gold suspended in the murk. It looks beautiful now, holy, even, like something poured from the cup of a god. You raise it to your lips, not to drink, just to smell. And it smells different this time, less like herbs, more like risk, because that's all this ever was. Not science, not magic, but the chance to step outside the rigid frame of Roman life and make your own fate, even if it ends badly, even if it doesn't work, even if you're never loved back. Because for just a moment, as the bottle warms in your hand and your heartbeat slows to match the rhythm of the city, you feel like you have power. Real power. The kind that history usually denies people like you. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. You slip the vial back into your tunic and keep walking. But now the streets feel stranger. The shadows lean in differently. Even the statues seem to watch you from the corners of their blind stone eyes. Maybe it's your nerves, or maybe it's the potion already seeping into your thoughts like mist through a cracked window. You haven't even used it, but it's changed you. That's the real danger of magic in Rome. Not the spell itself, but the way it rewires your perception. Like a mirror that shows not who you are, but who you hope to be. You start to imagine how things might go if you used it. Your crush sees you, smiles differently, laughs at your jokes, leans in just a little too close. You go for a walk, talk about politics or poems or nothing at all. And somehow, everything feels easier. But then you remember what happened to Livia Drusilla. She was no love-struck teenager. She was the wife of the most powerful man in Rome, Augustus himself. And yet even she, with her marble-draped poise and ruthless ambition, once flirted with the edge of forbidden affection. Not for herself, but for control. The story, half-whispered and rarely confirmed, is that Livia hosted a banquet for Augustus and slipped something into his wine. Not poison, not enough to harm, just a mood enhancer. A tincture meant to increase fondness, whatever that means. She wanted him more pliable, more trusting, and it worked. For a week, he gifted her land, praised her in public. But then his physician noticed something, a change in pulse, a distaste for figs, a paranoia that hadn't been there before. He traced it back to the wine, quietly, without confrontation. Augustus didn't accuse her. He simply stopped eating anything she offered. Livia, clever enough to read between silences, never tried again. But for the rest of her life, the love between them was shadowed by suspicion. The Empress of Rome, undone not by poison, but by hope. You think of that as you pass a tavern spilling with noise. Laughter, dice clattering, hands brushing in the dark. It's easy to forget how performative desire is here. Rome has rules for everything. Who can speak, who can touch, who can want. And most of those rules exist to protect one thing: status. If love potions were just about lust, the punishments wouldn't be so brutal. But once you make someone feel something against the natural order, you've violated Rome's favorite myth, that everything is where it belongs, that the powerful deserve their pleasure, that the poor must earn even affection. But over time, it broadened. It became a net wide enough to catch desire itself. Anyone who altered the mind or body of another without permission could be tried. That phrase, altered the mind, was a death sentence for love potion users, because affection is never purely rational. If someone fell for you, and someone else suspected unnatural influence, they could claim you had cast a spell. And whether you had or not didn't matter. The accusation alone could ruin you. Historians still argue whether this paranoia was genuinely about sorcery, or whether it was just legal camouflage for misogyny. Because, Funny enough, men who used aphrodisiacs were rarely punished. Roman society laughed about that. Men adding herbs to boost their virility? Perfectly acceptable, even encouraged. There were shops that sold dried bull testicles and gladiator sweat, believed to increase male stamina. Those weren't magic. Those were medicine. But when women bought even harmless things like saffron or licorice root, they were often watched, suspected, judged. You reach a bridge now, slick with algae and haunted by the echo of your own footsteps. It's here, they say, that a potion seller named Unia was thrown into the river for refusing to name her clients. She'd been arrested with 20 tiny jars and 3 sets of wax dolls, each carved with names scratched into their chests. The dolls were tied together with red string and sealed in clay. The authorities wanted to know who the names belonged to. Unia refused. They are prayers, she said, not weapons. It didn't matter. She was tied in a sack and dropped into the Tiber, the same punishment given to parricides. She wasn't accused of killing anyone, but in Rome, to manipulate. The heart was sometimes seen as worse than murder. Murder ended a life. A potion corrupted a soul. And yet, the demand never stopped. Every year, more vendors appeared. Some disguised as spice merchants, others as perfumers. One even claimed to be selling religious incense until someone realized her. Venus blend made people cry during prayers and flirt with strangers on the way home. She vanished after that, replaced by another, because as long as Rome had power imbalances, there would be people trying to level them, not with swords, but with herbs, oils, and whispered names at dusk. You pause now and look into the river. The water is black, smooth, indifferent. Somewhere beneath, 1,000 stories are lost. Bottles never used, names never confessed. And maybe love too, they. Kind that tried to bloom outside the lines drawn by law and lineage. You think of your own story. Still unwritten. Still uncertain. The vial in your tunic presses against your ribs, reminding you that choice is both privilege and burden. You could use it tonight, or never. You could let longing pass like a fever. Or you could risk it all for one stolen chance. The stars above don't offer guidance. The gods are silent. And the city? The city just keeps humming. Its heart beating with a rhythm older than law, louder than fear. You wake to the sound of dogs barking somewhere in the distance. The kind of sharp territorial noise that cuts through stone walls and dreams alike. Dawn hasn't yet arrived, but the darkness has softened. Rome's skyline is just a jagged ink stroke against the deep gray of early morning, and everything smells like smoke and damp wool. You stayed out too long, wandered too far, and now the potion in your tunic feels like contraband sewn into your life. You should throw it in the Tiber, let it sink beside the bones of other dreams. But instead, your fingers brush against it again, like it's part of your skin. Maybe you're not ready to let it go. Maybe you want to see how far the story can bend before it breaks. And maybe, just maybe, you're not as alone in this as you thought. Because love potions were never just a tool of the desperate. They were also a weapon of the powerful. Consider the story of Livia's rival, Julia the Elder, daughter of Augustus, who had her own quiet empire of secrets. Historians still argue whether Julia was wild or simply independent, whether she truly had affairs, or whether the rumors were retaliation for her refusal to play Rome's obedient daughter. But one accusation stands out. It wasn't about sex. It was about potions. Julia was said to have commissioned a blend from a foreign alchemist, something that made men feel weak in her presence. They said her eyes sparkled unnaturally. That men stammered when she spoke. That even hardened generals became poets under her gaze. Was it charm, wit, or something darker stirred into honeyed wine? No one could prove it, but suspicion was enough. Augustus exiled her, stripped her of titles, and spread word that his own blood had become corrupted. It wasn't her body he feared, it was her influence. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She never denied the claims. She simply vanished into history's shadow, where women like her often end up half myth, half cautionary tale. And yet, behind every warning is a hint of envy. Because Rome's elite may have condemned love potions publicly, but privately, they collected recipes like rare artifacts. There's evidence that the household of Agrippina the Younger employed a full-time kitchen scribe who documented culinary enhancements for affection. These weren't poisons, they were aphrodisiacs presented as luxuries. Pine nuts soaked in date wine, mussels crushed with coriander. Even the Emperor Claudius had a favorite blend: leeks, fish liver, and pepper oil, believed to increase virility. But when Agrippina began experimenting with her own blends, herbs slipped into wine at family banquets. Strange oils rubbed into the emperor's scalp under the guise of relieving headaches. Whispers began that she wanted more than affection, that she wanted control. And when Claudius died, his mouth reportedly foaming, her kitchen was the first place they searched. No clear poison was ever found. Just a diary with notes. Wine blend reaction calm but suggestible. Tincture of mustard seed irritates but not lethal. Add opium only with care. Was she trying to seduce or to subdue? Was her love a bomb or a slow strategic warfare? The scrolls don't say. But her son Nero took the throne, and she became one of the most powerful women in Roman history, at least until he decided she was too powerful and arranged her death. You pass. A villa with faded frescoes, lovers, and awkward poses, painted with all the subtlety of a tavern joke. These images were meant to be sensual, but time and smoke have made them ghost-like, as if even painted passion fades under Roman cynicism. You wonder how many of the couples depicted were real, and how many were idealized versions of control. Because in Rome, even sex was political. The Kama Sutra may have focused on mutual pleasure, but Roman texts? Mostly instructions. Who could touch whom? How to assert dominance without losing face. Love was allowed as long as it obeyed. And when it didn't, it was pathologized. Men claimed madness. Women were accused of spell work. There's a story from the provinces Gaul, maybe, or Sicily, of a woman named Albania who fell for a younger man, a soldier with terrible posture and perfect teeth. She was a widow, wealthy, and bored. She offered him gifts. He accepted. Then he backed away. She tried flattery, then silence. Then, eventually, she sent for a charm, a mixture of poppy oil, ash, and a shaved coin melted into honey. It wasn't meant to hurt him, just sway him, and it did. He came to her door that night, drunk and laughing. They spent 3 days inside. On the 4th, he collapsed during morning drills. Fever, confusion, died within the week. The potion likely wasn't to blame, but once the rumors started, they didn't stop. Albania was dragged from her home barefoot, her hair torn out in handfuls. She was tried, not for murder, but for enslavement of the mind. Her guilt wasn't legal, it was symbolic. She'd crossed a line. Not just age, not just class, but intention. She had wanted too much. And in Rome, a woman who wants without permission is a threat. The laws, of course, never used the word love. That would imply vulnerability. They spoke instead of corruption, enticement, moral weakening, veneficium. A word that wrapped around everything from actual poisons to a single flirtatious glance. It was elastic, vague, and deeply gendered. Because while men could excuse their passions, blame drink, stress, or the gods, women who stirred desire, especially with help, were seen as manufacturers of sin. You think of that every time someone laughs at the idea of love potions. They joke about it, dismiss it as silly. But Rome didn't laugh. Rome exiled, Rome executed. Rome feared. And still, the bottles were passed. In kitchens and temples, under market stalls and inside scrolls, recipes changed hands like smuggled relics. One popular blend involved rabbit blood, fig syrup, and a specific type of ash said to be collected from the altar of Venus only after midnight. Another swore by eagle feathers soaked in milk. Some of it worked only in the imagination. But imagination was enough. Placebo love can feel as real as the divine. And if someone believes they're in love, if their heart skips and their cheeks flush, and their sleep is haunted by a name, then who's to say the potion failed? You stop now under a fig tree. The fruit is heavy, sweet in the air, even though it's still too early in the season. You reach up, pick one, bite. It's sour, not ready. You eat it anyway. That's what Rome does to people. It teaches you to take what's bitter and pretend it's ripened. To accept the lie if the truth is too complicated. And maybe that's what the potion is. Not a shortcut to love, but a mirror held up to your own loneliness. A way to say, at least I tried. A ritual to give shape to longing. Because sometimes the ache is worse than the crime. You walk on, slower now, heart heavier. Not from guilt, but from knowing you're just one in a long line of people who wanted more than Rome was willing to give. Somewhere past the crowded vegetable stalls of the Forum Holitorium, down a street that always smells vaguely of vinegar and burnt bread, a man once dropped dead in the middle of a wedding feast. His name was Decimus Valeries, a middling noble known more for his gambling debts than his charm, and his death-choking, twitching, eyes wide with a kind of cosmic betrayal, sent a chill through Rome, not because he died, but because of who sat next to him when he did. Her name was Turslu, his new bride. 17, nervous, newly powdered and perfumed. Her hair braided so tightly, it made her blink too slowly. They said she had slipped something into his wine. Not poison, exactly. Not enough to kill a man like Decimus Tall, bloated with pride and salted meats, but something unexpected. A love potion. Something to calm his temper, make him less cruel, maybe even more tender. Because Decimus had a reputation. He'd been married twice before. One wife vanished, the other was seen muttering to herself in the Temple of Ceres, covered in bruises and perfume, until she stopped speaking entirely. Tursula knew what she was walking into. Her family had debts. The marriage was a settlement, not a choice. But she wanted just a little more than endurance. She wanted him to be kind, so she bought a tincture. Something her cousin swore by. It had worked on her own husband, made him come home earlier, speak in lower tones. Just stir it into his cup, she'd said, and think of something beautiful. Tursula had. She thought of the way he looked when he laughed, of a future where she didn't flinch when he entered the room. But Decimus collapsed before the third course, his lips foaming over roast boar and pickled dates. His cup shattered. His pulse faded. The physician claimed it was his heart. But the guests had seen the way Tursula's hand trembled. The way. She didn't cry, only sat very still, like someone who had asked the gods for a favor and received too much too soon. The court didn't call it murder. They called it veneficium, a crime of the soul, of the mind, of the hidden hand. Tursula was placed under house arrest, then sent to live in a cloistered villa in the Sabine Hills. Not prison, but not freedom. A soft burial. That's how Rome handled inconvenient women, wrapped them in silence and shame and distance. It wasn't about guilt, it was about optics. A noble wife using magic to control her husband? Unthinkable. But also very, very thinkable because it kept happening. Rome was a city obsessed with surfaces. The marble had to be polished, the togas had to be white, and emotions, especially those too tangled or too feminine, had to be kept behind doors. That's why potion stories spread like wildfire, because they explained the unexplainable. A senator changed his will? Must have been a spell. A soldier deserts his post to chase a barmaid? Definitely enchanted. A daughter refuses an arranged marriage and stares too long at her reflection? Possessed, or worse, self-possessed. which might as well be witchcraft in a city where women were meant to orbit, not glow. You think of Tursla now, maybe still alive in that hillside house pacing. A garden where the roses bloom too red. Does she regret it? Does she still believe in the tincture? Or does she, like so many others, carry that memory like a stone in her mouth, too hard to swallow, too dangerous to spit out? And what about the potion sellers? The women who brewed. These risks into little glass bottles? They weren't all witches. Some were healers, midwives, herbalists with actual knowledge passed down through generations. One famous name was Sisha, a freedwoman who ran an herb stall near the theater of Marcellus. She sold teas for cramps, poultices for bruises, and, when asked quietly enough, moon oils, a euphemism for love tonics. Her best seller was a blend of basil, honey, and the crushed seeds of a foreign plant she wouldn't name. Clients said it made them feel warm, brave, willing. Not always loved, but less afraid of love, which was close enough. Sisha kept meticulous notes, not just on recipes, but on her customers. What they wanted, who they feared, who they dreamed about. The scrolls were seized after her arrest, and they read like poetry. Julia wants eyes to linger, prefers silence to words. Marcus fears his wife, dreams of his servant, cannot sleep. Sextilia wants him to notice her laugh, nothing else, just that. Sisha was convicted during a sweep of potion. Vendors, part of a public effort to cleanse the city of superstition. She was fined, whipped, and made to stand in the forum with a sign that read "Dealer in False Hearts." Her stall was burned, her clients scattered. But the need didn't vanish. It never does. Rome can crush a woman. It can ban a bottle, but it cannot legislate longing. And longing, desire's quieter cousin, is where most of these stories begin. Not with lust, not with obsession, but with the gentle ache of wanting more than your life allows. A different kind of conversation. A gaze held a second longer. The sense that someone might love you, if only they could see past the noise. That's what makes these potions so dangerous. Not their ingredients, but their intention. Because even the suggestion of magic implies that someone has dared to want too much. You remember now another tale, told in passing by a bathhouse attendant as she scrubbed the steam room walls. A noble girl, barely 14, had fallen for her music tutor, a Greek slave with calloused hands and the voice of a falling star. She was too young to name her feelings, but not too young to act. She stole a balm from her mother's trunk, a thick yellow salve meant to attract favor. Rubbed it on her wrists before each lesson. Watched him closely. He didn't change. But she did. She grew bolder, spoke more. Smiled. He noticed, yes. He even told her she was improving. But the moment her mother saw the empty jar, the slave was sent away. She was sent to a convent. The salve was blamed, as if confidence itself were a contagion. No one asked if the balm had worked. Only if it had dared that Rome feared love it couldn't predict. And what are potions if not unpredictable love given shape? You're back at your own doorstep now. Dawn bleeding across the rooftops in a quiet. Hush, the city is waking, stretching its ancient limbs, pretending that it has never been young and foolish. You hold the vial one last time, not to use, but to remember. To mark the moment when you almost believed in shortcuts. You don't know if you'll ever use it. Maybe you'll keep it hidden, like a letter never sent. Or maybe you'll leave it where someone else might find it. Someone with their own ache. Their own list of maybes. Because in a city like this, where laws define who gets to love and how, sometimes the smallest rebellion is believing you deserve more than silence. You think you've seen Rome's secrets. You think by now the city has unfolded all its twisted petals for you, perfumed, wilted, blushed with old blood and whispered regrets. But then you find yourself in the shadow of a brothel on the edge of the Subura district, and you realize there's another layer one that smells like warm oil, crushed citrus, and the metallic flick of a coin dropped onto a naked belly. This is not the Rome of marble and forum speeches. This is the Rome of closed doors, painted ceilings, and women who know how to mix herbs better than any physician, because their lives depend on it. A courtesan named Sabina works here. Or worked here, nobody's really sure. The wall's still. Remember her, though. One room is still called Cubiculum Amoris Sabinae, the chamber of Sabina's love. She didn't just entertain clients. She enthralled them. Men paid extra to lie with her after she burned a specific incense musk, cinnamon, and some unknown black resin that made even senators forget their own names. She never kept clients. She made them leave wanting. That was her gift. But one man didn't leave. He fell apart. Lost sleep, lost weight. Started showing up drunk in the street, declaring Sabina had bewitched his soul, that her kisses were curses, that her touch had turned his mind to honey. And that's where the problem began. Because it's one thing to sell pleasure. It's another to be accused of selling unnatural desire. The man's father was a magistrate. The trial was fast. Sabina claimed innocence, said the incense was just imported from Cyprus, nothing special. But under pressure, a servant confessed. Sabina had indeed mixed a small quantity of emotional tonic into the man's wine, something to slow his pulse, relax his nerves. Not poison, not seduction. Just adjustment, a little nudge. A soft hand at the back of the mind. Enough to make him forget his father's voice and listen to her laugh instead. She was sentenced to lashes and exile. But by the time the verdict was read, Sabina was gone. Some say she bribed the guard. Others say she slipped her judge the same. Wine. Either way, she vanished. But her legend didn't. They say her incense blend is still used smuggled, altered, passed around in handwritten recipes. And if you smell something strange in a lover's room, something warm, smoky, with a hint of orange peel, it might be her ghost still working the night shift. That's the thing Rome never understood. Desire doesn't obey. It haunts. It floats. Between stalls, clings to tunics, breathes between the lines of market chatter. You walk now through that same market, and it's all there: baskets of fennel, jars of olive oil, bundles of dried herbs. The sellers shout about freshness, not knowing half their stock is used in love magic. Powdered laurel to inspire courage. Rue for passion. Even the fishmonger's stand sells eel blood to a man who insists it helps his wife sleep less deeply. You watch the transaction like a priest at a back alley sacrament, and you realize everyone here is playing a role. The man smiles. The seller nods. Nobody names the real intent. Because in Rome, true motives are dangerous currency. Better to speak in code. Better to say, a gift for my lover, than I want him to crave me. Better to say, asleep. Draft, than I need her quiet. The marketplace is a masquerade, and beneath the painted smiles are teeth sharpened by longing. And behind it all, the question that never dies: do the potions even work? That's the riddle Rome never solves. Historians still argue about the science. Foucault would say it's not about efficacy, it's about the structure of power. Webb would say the erotic is a performance, and potions are props. But the people who bought them, they weren't quoting philosophy. They were crying into cups, folding spells into linen, whispering names into glass. And that act, the ritual itself, was the point. Even if it didn't work, it felt like control. And in a world built to strip you of choice, feeling like a god for a moment was sometimes worth the risk. You step into a shaded alcove, once a shrine to Venus but now abandoned, roof caved in, ivy curling through the cracks. You find a scrap of papyrus near the base of a broken column. On it, a name, not yours, not someone you know, but written in a way that makes you pause. The way the ink curves. The way the edges are burned. Someone made an offering here. Someone whispered something into the dirt and hoped the goddess heard. The air still hums with it low, like bees behind a wall. You wonder what they asked for. A return? A confession? A touch? Did they get it? Or did they, like so many others, simply leave the paper and walk away, letting the shrine hold their unanswered question? Rome is a graveyard of desire. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind you bury alive and hope doesn't claw its way back. That's why the love potion trade never died. It just changed clothes, disguised itself, became incense, became ointment, became prayer. Because love is still the one thing the city can't regulate, no matter how many laws it writes. And desire? Desire eats laws for breakfast. You pass a wall etched with graffiti. "I love Lu more than Rome," someone wrote underneath it. Then leave. And that's it, isn't it? The war between wanting and surviving. You want, but you also want to stay safe. You crave, but you also crave approval. So you do what the ancients did. You bottle your longing, label it something polite, and call it perfume. But perfume, like potions, lingers, even after you've washed it off. Even after you've tried to forget, you take out the vial again. Not to use, just to look. The liquid inside moves slowly, like it's thinking. Like it knows something you don't. It reflects the sky now, catching the clouds. And you see yourself in it, blurred, bent, small. You don't know if you'll ever open it. Maybe it's better as a story, as a symbol. Or maybe late one night, when the ache is louder than the fear, you'll tilt it into a cup and whisper a name. Not because you believe in magic, but because, for one moment, you want to believe someone could love you without needing permission. Because in a city built on conquest, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is ask to be held. They say that Agrippina never smiled without a reason. That her lips curved like strategy, and her hands were always clean, but someone else's were always stained when she was done. You picture her now, in a room lit by oil lamps shaped like doves, swirling a spoon through her husband's wine. Not because she hated him, not because she needed him gone yet, but because she wanted him docile, impressed, predictable. This was long before the mushrooms, before the infamous night when Claudius clutched his throat and collapsed into his soup. This was when she still needed his signature, when she still needed his favor. And so she experimented, not with poisons, not with blades, but with tinctures. Gentle things, drops of hellebore diluted in elderflower syrup. A dusting of something bitter mixed into fig paste, nothing lethal. Just enough to soften his tongue, to make him say yes. That's what power looks like when you can't hold a sword. It looks like knowing which herb clouds the mind without stopping the heart. It looks like love, or something close enough that nobody dares to ask questions. Agrippina wasn't just a mother or a wife or a murderer. She was a chemist of emotions, a chef of consent. And while historians still argue whether she truly killed Claudius or merely nudged fate forward with mushroom sauce, what's harder to deny is this: she understood the line between affection and influence better than any emperor ever did. You walk now through the ruins of what used to be a banquet hall. The columns are broken, the floor cracked, but you can still imagine it: linen tablecloths, grapes so ripe they burst in your fingers, guests sprawled on couches like tired gods. Somewhere in the haze of spiced wine and harp music, a servant approaches, offers a cup, a toast, and that's all it takes. In Rome, love isn't spoken. It's served, sweetened, infused with things no one can pronounce. And once it's inside you, you can never quite be sure what you've agreed to. It wasn't just the nobility, of course. Ordinary people had their own recipes, passed down in whispers and crumpled scrolls. Some believed in mandrake root, buried under a full moon and kissed before grinding. Others swore by mulled wine stirred with a brass ring once worn during childbirth. You've seen the graffiti near the gladiator barracks, phrases like "Belus took my heart and my brew," or "he drinks, he dreams, he returns." Sometimes, if you listen closely in the Subura baths, you can still hear women reciting incantations under their breath, like prayers. May his eyes tire of others. May his feet forget their way home. May his hands remember only my shape. There's power in that, even if it's just words. Even if the potion is mostly sugar and hope. Because when a woman speaks a spell, she's not just asking for love, she's refusing to wait for it. That's what made the Senate nervous. Not the risk of death, but the risk of independence. If potions could make someone fall in love, then the whole social contract unraveled. Dowries meant nothing. Inheritance could be hijacked. Men who were supposed to command might be compelled, and that terror led to crackdowns, raids, public trials where women were forced to list ingredients they could barely pronounce. Did you give him sea fennel? Was there wormwood? Did you speak the name of Venus before boiling? One woman, Letitia, a spice vendor's daughter, was arrested because her neighbor heard her grinding something at night. That's it. No victim, no effect, just sound. But it was enough. She was brought before the magistrate, hands tied with linen, and asked to explain the paste found under her bed. "It's for burns," she said. "My brother fell into the oven." But the scrolls show that one juror didn't believe her. Not because of the evidence, but because of her voice. "She spoke too evenly," he wrote, as if rehearsed. Letitia was flogged. Her shop was given to a cousin. And in every market since, her name has been muttered like an ingredient. Itself, a pinch of Letitia, for caution. You pause now at the edge of a fountain, one that used to be sacred, but now collects more coins than prayers. You drop one in, not for luck, for silence, to see if the city will respond. It doesn't. The water just ripples, pretending not to notice you. And still, you think of using the potion, just once. Just to know. You imagine it, the slight tremor in your hand as you stir it into a cup, the heat of watching someone drink. What you've made, the unbearable wait for a reaction. Will they smile more? Will they lean in? Will they say your name like it matters? Or will they just sleep? Unchanged, immune. And then you'll know it wasn't the world that was cold it. Was you. That's the real risk. Not exile. Not exposure. But the confirmation that no potion, no powder, no whispered spell can change the fact that some people will never want you. Still, the bottle remains in your pocket. Still sealed. Still full of potential. Because as long as you haven't used it, you haven't failed. You're still in the middle of the story, not the end. And that's why so many never do it. They buy the potion. They believe in it. But they leave it on the shelf, a maybe in glass. A heartbeat with a cork. You return home just as the sun begins to climb. Rome is stretching now, yawning in its golden armor. Children shout. Vendors open shutters. Somewhere a couple laughs. In a way that makes you jealous. Not because they're in love, but because they didn't have to work for it. They just had it. You step inside, close the door, and exhale. The room is quiet. The potion is still warm from your body. And you? You're somewhere between fear and faith, standing on the edge of a decision that millions before you have faced. From queens to slaves, philosophers to prostitutes. The choice to love on your own terms, or to ask the gods for help. And tonight, maybe you'll uncork the bottle, or maybe you'll just hold it. Like a secret, like a weapon, like a prayer. You wake to a knock at the door, not urgent, not aggressive, just soft enough to be unsettling. When you open it, there's no one there. Only a folded piece of linen tucked into the crack, heavy with something lumpy inside. You unfold it and find a small papyrus scroll, rolled tight and tied with black thread. Beneath it, a slice of quince, dried and sugared. A gift. You glance down both ends of the street, but the cobblestones are empty. The shadows still thick in corners where the sun hasn't quite reached. You close the door, heart tapping like a warning drum, and untie the scroll. It reads only this: "I heard you might need this." Beneath the words is a symbol, just two intersecting lines, sharp and uneven, like they were drawn by someone with shaking hands or a knife instead of a stylus. It's not a name. It's a signature of risk. This is what makes you different from the rest of the city now. You've stepped into a second layer of Rome, one that exists below the marble and incense, the legal codes and household gods. A place where symbols speak louder than language, and everything traded has more weight than gold. Someone knows about your vial. Or maybe they just sense it, how your energy has changed, how you move slower, how your eyes linger a second too long. That's how this underground survives. Not with announcements, but with intuition. You've been initiated not by ritual, but by ache. You unwrap the quince, stare at it. To anyone else, it's just fruit, but you know better. Quince is sacred to Venus. It's offered at weddings. It's sliced into infusions for passion. It's pressed into oils for arousal. Whoever left this wanted you to know. You are being watched. And not UNKINDLY. Rome has always had these invisible lines. Who's in? Who's out? Who's safe? Who's interesting? And once you cross into the realm of the interesting, you're never entirely safe again. There's a reason legal documents in Rome sometimes included a clause forbidding love spells. Asterisk. No party shall be under the influence of foreign substances or enchantments that might render the union unnatural. Some women even tried to write into their wills that any affection proven to be enhanced by spells would invalidate inheritance. Love in this city was not an emotion, it was a legal status. Something you could lose, something you could fake, something you could be sued over, and of course, people tried. There's a story recounted half-believed in the letters of a minor magistrate about a man who annulled his marriage on the grounds that his wife had used a love charm before their wedding. He claimed she had gifted him a ring carved with erotic symbols, and that every time he touched it, he felt more inclined to agree with her suggestions. After the charm was removed, he threw it into a temple fire. He suddenly realized he didn't love her. Claimed he never had. She wept in court. He won. She lost her dowry, her standing, and her home, all for a ring. Or, perhaps, all because she believed in a ring. That's the danger of believing, isn't it? Once you admit that love can be altered, can be brewed, blended, bottled, then every warm glance becomes suspicious. Every kiss is a potential crime scene. Rome feared that deeply, which is why philosophers like Seneca warned against perfumed affections, claiming they were false virtues dressed in sandalwood and lust. Seneca, of course, wrote this while reclining in a villa, sipping wine infused with imported cinnamon bark and watching his favorite servant dance. The hypocrisy, like the scent of roses in July, was overwhelming. You step outside, scroll in hand, and head toward the river. You need air, and maybe answers. Along the way, you pass a woman selling garlands of ivy and laurel. She hums softly, almost a lullaby, and you realize the tune is an old charm. Not dangerous, not even secret. Just a melody believed to soothe heartbreak. You buy a garland, not because you need it, but because the woman looks like someone who used to believe in things. She smiles. You wonder if she knows you're carrying a vial that might ruin someone's life. Or save it. At the edge of the Tiber, you find others have already gathered. Not a crowd, just people like you alone, pretending not to look at each other. A man tossing pebbles, a girl chewing on pomegranate seeds, a slave carving tiny marks into a coin. This is the city's pulse beneath the noise, the part no historian writes about. The part that makes everything else seem like theater, you think. Of the scroll again. I heard you might need this. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning. It was solidarity. Proof that someone, somewhere, saw your need and didn't judge it. That's rare in a place like this. In Rome, empathy is often buried beneath protocol. But here, among the bruised fruit and broken hearts, someone reached out. And then you remember another story, less famous, more intimate. A young scribe named Publius, who fell in love with a gladiator. It was forbidden, of course. Not because of their genders. Rome was flexible about that. But because of status. A scribe had prospects. A gladiator had none. But Publius wrote him poems, hid them inside bread loaves. One day, the gladiator returned the gift, a small clay flask filled with something amber and musky. For courage, he wrote. Publius wore it on his skin. It wasn't magic. It didn't make anyone fall in love. But it gave him the strength to speak. And when the truth came out, Publius wasn't punished for the affection. He was punished for the potion. Because even though no harm was done, the court decided the act of wanting was too bold. They called it manipulation. But really, it was hope. That's the thread running through all these stories. Hope turned into action. Wanting translated into touch. And the law hated that. Because law thrives on stillness, on roles preserved, on things unbroken. But people are messy, hungry, tired of waiting. And sometimes, a vial of herbs is the only way to feel brave enough to want more. You look at your own vial again. It catches the light, glints like a promise or a lie. You still haven't opened it. And yet, it's opened you. Made you consider things you hadn't dared to name. And perhaps that's its real purpose, not to change another's heart, but to test your own. Because in this city, where love is litigated and feelings are fined, even holding a bottle like this is rebellion. Even thinking about it makes you dangerous. And maybe, in a world that fears your desire, the most powerful thing you can do is desire anyway. The rain starts without warning, just a soft whisper against the roof tiles at first, then a hush that wraps the city in water and memory. You pull your cloak tighter and duck beneath the overhang of a closed bakery, the scent of stale honey and crushed poppy seeds still lingering in the air. The vial is nestled in the curve of your chest now, and you can feel its warmth even through the fabric, like a tiny heartbeat that's not yours. The streets shine with puddles, every reflection warped and moving, as if Rome itself is changing shape under the weather. And maybe it is. Maybe that's what love potions do, not to the city, but to you. They don't flip a switch. They shift the current. They make you feel just off enough to wonder what's real and what's influenced. And no one knew that better than Seneca the Younger, the philosopher who spent most of his life trying to explain away emotion like it was a rash you could bathe off. He once wrote that true virtue was immune to charm, that the wise man could not be seduced. But even Seneca had his doubts, especially the day he walked into his cousin's villa and smelled a perfume so rich, so strange that he stopped mid-sentence and forgot why he'd come. The host, a wealthy merchant named Calpurnius, had just returned from Alexandria and was showing off his latest luxury, a blend of imported incense meant to relax the mind and stir appreciation. His words, not arousal, not affection, just appreciation. Seneca, ever the skeptic, sniffed the air and immediately declared it artificial. Too floral, too sweet, but something was off. He stayed for hours, far longer than planned. He listened to music, ate figs dusted with cinnamon, laughed, which he rarely did. And afterward, in his journal, he wrote something odd. Asterisk, I felt more amenable than usual. My thoughts softened at the edges. He never mentioned the incense again. But 2 months later, he passed a law proposal that included a clause regulating unnatural emotional coaxing via scent. Historians still debate whether this was aimed at the perfume or the merchant's daughter, who sat beside Seneca that evening, never speaking, only smiling. That's the kind of power Rome feared, not thunder, but suggestion, not a sword at your throat, but a fragrance in your air. Something subtle enough to deny, but strong enough to change a man's mind. And if even a stoic could be bent, then what hope did anyone else have? You think of all the ways scent and touch and taste blur in this city. The way lovers leave traces on each other, resin on lips, oil in hair, spice beneath fingernails. You think of a woman you once saw in the Temple of Venus, kneeling not in prayer, but in negotiation. She held a bundle of sage and goat's blood, wrapped in linen, and whispered into the statue's ear. You couldn't hear the words, but you felt them. Not a plea, a command. She wasn't asking for love. She was demanding its return. And maybe that's what Rome never wanted to admit that. Love, true love, is violent in its hunger. That even the gentle ones ache like warriors when ignored. That's why so many turned to spells. Because regular affection wasn't enough. They wanted devotion, obsession, the kind of bond that would survive shame, class war. The kind that couldn't be broken with silence. There's an old rumor about an imperial advisor, his was name erased from most records, who once kept a mistress not for pleasure, but for prediction. She claimed she could taste the air and know who was about. Tio betray him. He believed her. Gave her jewelry, access, influence. But when she refused to share her method, he grew suspicious. Had her followed. They found her visiting an apothecary on the edge of the city, buying tinctures labeled for clarity. It wasn't prophecy. It was chemistry. Herbs that heightened senses, made smells sharper, instincts stronger. When confronted, she confessed. "I gave myself an edge," she said. "Is that so different from what you do with soldiers and scribes?" He exiled her anyway. But months later, when assassins broke into his chambers, it was said he cried her name before he died. Perhaps hoping for one last warning. Perhaps wishing he had believed in her potion just a little more. You step into the rain now. It's warm, not unpleasant, and the city seems quieter for it. You pass a child holding her mother's hand, both soaked but smiling. You see a soldier duck under an awning, shaking out his cloak, muttering curses in Greek, and you walk past a vendor covering his wares with a tarp, the scent of oregano and lemon bark leaking into the air. You wonder how many of them are in love right now. How many are afraid? How many have thought about changing someone's feelings, not with kindness, but with craft? Because kindness, let's be honest, doesn't always work. Not here. Not in a city where marriages are arranged and affection is a transaction. That's the irony. Rome feared love potions because they offered what the law refused. Fairness, choice, the chance for someone usually overlooked, too poor, too plain, too powerless to matter. That's why people like you bought them, not to harm, but to be seen. You reach your home and light a lamp. The rain taps at the windows like someone trying to remember a forgotten story. You sit with the vial again, still sealed, still waiting. And you wonder, what if it's already working? Not on your crush, not on the world, but on you. What if carrying it this long has made you braver? What if every glance you've given lately, every word you've dared to speak, has been touched by the belief that something could change? That's a kind of magic too. And Rome, for all its rules and punishments, is built on that kind of hope. You see it in every temple, every offering, every name etched into brick beside the words asterisk, I love, not past tense, not future, present. As if the act itself keeps you alive. So tonight, you might open the bottle, or not. You might dream of someone's hands, or dream of your own, holding theirs. You might burn with regret, or rise with clarity. But either way, you'll remember this. Love isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to risk anyway. The storm breaks by mid-morning, and with it, Rome exhales. The streets glisten, slick, with puddles and mud, but there's something cleaner now, something soft at the edges. You walk slower, not just to avoid slipping, but because the city feels different, emptied, like a bowl after a feast. The air smells like wet brick, olive wood, and something else. Crushed lavender. It lingers, faint but deliberate. You follow it, turning left past the butcher's stall, where a pig's leg swings on a hook, and then right, down a narrow alley painted with old graffiti names, hearts, accusations, spells. And there, tucked between two walls like a secret, is a threadbare curtain, blue, faded. Someone once embroidered stars into it. You push it aside and step into a room that doesn't officially exist. No sign, no shelves, just shadows, and in the middle, a girl sitting on the floor, grinding something in a bronze bowl. She doesn't look up, doesn't speak. Her hands move like they've always known what to do, circular, steady, deliberate. On a low table beside her, 5 vials, each with a ribbon tied around its neck, red, green, gold, black and white. She points to the one with the gold ribbon, then to you. No explanation. You reach for it, but stop. What is it? You ask. She finally looks at you. Her eyes are dark and reflective like polished walnut. Not what you think, she says. Not what you need. What you already have, just louder. Then she returns to her grinding. You leave without the bottle. Because maybe she's right. Maybe the power isn't in what's added, but what's allowed to rise. Outside, Rome feels warmer. Or maybe that's just your skin catching up to your breath. You pass a street performer balancing daggers on his chin. He winks at you. You don't wink back, but you do smile. A real one, because for once, you don't feel invisible. Not entirely. You think again of the story of the slave girl, the one who stitched a love charm into the hem of her master's tunic. She didn't speak Latin well, didn't have wealth or legal standing, but she had a needle, and a name, and a heart that beat faster when he passed by. So she took a scrap of linen, dipped it in wine, pressed it to her lips, and whispered his name over it 5 times while the moon was full. Then she stitched it carefully, tenderly into the seam of his favorite cloak. The next day, he wore it. The day after, he noticed her. A week later, he asked her name. But that's not the end of the story. Because when his wife discovered the charm, she didn't rage. She didn't accuse the girl of sorcery. Instead, she called a seamstress and ordered every garment in the house to be unstitched, checked, purified. The girl was sent away. Not punished, just erased. Her name removed from the household registry. Her charm buried in the garden, beneath a lemon tree that never bore fruit again. That's how Rome dealt with inconvenient affection. Not with fire, with forgetting. And that's the fear that keeps you from using your vial. Not failure. But what comes after success? If it works, if the person you love smiles differently, touches your arm, says your name with new weight, how will you ever know if it's real? What if they find out? What if they forgive you? Worse, what if they don't? What if you've not only ruined the moment, but the memory? You pass a baker handing out samples of honey cake. He offers you a slice. You hesitate, then take it. It's warm, sticky, perfect. You eat it slowly, and for the first time in days, your shoulders loosen. Because maybe not everything sweet has to come with suspicion. Maybe sometimes things can just be good. Even briefly, but you know better than to get comfortable. The charm sellers don't. They keep working, keep adapting. You hear of one, a woman named Pelonia, who's taken to selling spell-stuffed dolls disguised as toys. Parents buy them for teething babies. Lovers slip them into travel satchels. The dolls look harmless, but inside, salt hair, scraps of love letters burned to ash. One doll made a man walk 15 miles in sandals to propose to a woman he hadn't spoken to in years. Another made a merchant confess his deepest secrets in his sleep. The law hasn't caught up yet, but they will. Rome always finds a way to criminalize whatever it can't control. You pass the Temple of Juno, where a priest is lecturing to a group of young men in clean tunics. You stop and listen. He's warning them about unnatural affection, about the dangers of allowing themselves to be ruled by others' emotions. A true Ramang, he says, loves only when it suits the state. You almost laugh, almost, because how many of those boys will go home tonight and write poetry they'll never send? How many will buy perfumes, oils, charms, hoping someone will look their way? And how many will blame witchcraft when the looking turns to longing? You make your way back toward home, slower now. You pass a couple arguing in whispers, another kissing. Under an arch, life unfolds around you like always. But you see it differently. The potion has changed you. Not by its contents, but by its presence. It's made you aware, hyper-aware, of every choice, every silence, every glance that lingers half a second too long. That's the true danger. The thing no law can touch. The way these little bottles make you believe in the possibility of transformation, even if they never open, even if they dry out. The moment you acquire one, you begin to shift. You start to imagine a version of yourself who could be loved, not tolerated, not used, but adored. And once you imagine that, Rome loses its grip. Just a little. You reach your door and pause. In your pocket, the vial is warm again. Maybe it always was. Maybe it responds to the body like a pet or a promise. You don't open it, but you don't hide it either. You leave it on the windowsill, where the morning light can hit it, where someone passing might see it and wonder, where it's no longer a secret, but a choice, quiet, glowing, waiting. You're dreaming again, except this time, it feels like a memory wearing perfume. You're in a candlelit room, walls lined with scrolls, and someone is whispering your name in a language that doesn't belong to Rome, but feels like it should. There's a cup in your hand. You don't remember lifting it. The liquid inside shimmers like oil and gold leaf, like sunlight pressed into syrup. You bring it to your lips and suddenly wake, heart pounding, throat dry, the echo of your name still vibrating through your chest. You sit up. The window is open, and the vial is gone. It's not on the sill, not on the floor. You check your cloak, your shoes, the shadows. Nothing. No shattered glass, no sticky residue. Just absence. And you don't know what's worse, that it was stolen or that you might have used it in your sleep. You stand there for a while, frozen in the kind of fear that doesn't scream, just hums. The morning is gray and dull, and every sound outside seems distant. You press your fingers to your lips, trying to taste something. Honey? Citrus? Nothing. Maybe this is how it begins. Maybe this is how the stories start. The ones where someone falls in love and can't explain why. The ones where a senator abandons duty, or a servant walks into fire smiling. Not because of a spell, because of a choice they didn't know they made. There's one poem that tells of a man named Publius who swore he was cursed. Every woman he looked at seemed to love him. Every man wanted his advice. He thought himself divine, blessed by Eros, until one day, a rival handed him a scroll with one line underlined. Asterisk, you are only as loved as the spell that surrounds you. Asterisk. Publius lost his mind. Or maybe just his illusions. He started bathing 3 times a day, trying to wash off what wasn't real. He died muttering about invisible threads and perfume that bites. You tie your cloak tighter and leave the house. If someone took the vial, it wasn't robbery, it was ritual. A passing of power, or maybe punishment. Because in this city, intention has gravity. Maybe it fell into the wrong hands. Or the right ones. Or maybe, just maybe, someone thought you'd waited long enough. As you walk, the streets feel changed. The vendors are louder, the smells sharper, everything tingles. You brush past a woman holding a basket of olives, and her skin feels electric against yours. A man selling bracelets tells you your hands are beautiful. A stray cat rubs against your leg, then darts away like it's tasted something strange in your shadow. You keep walking. Faster now. Toward the forum, toward the place where stories collide with statues. That's when you see them. The person you've been thinking about all this time. The one you nearly drugged. The one whose name you've whispered into your pillow and stitched into your dreams. They're standing by a pillar, laughing with someone else, completely unaware of the storm inside your chest. You watch their hands, their mouth, the way they shift their weight when listening. You think about how much you've wanted to be chosen, to be seen, to be loved, and then they look up. See you. Something flickers in their expression. Surprise? Curiosity? Recognition? You can't tell. The air around you thickens. Every step they take toward you feels like a lifetime. When they reach you, they say your name not as a question, not as a statement, but like a note in a familiar song. You nod. Swallow. Wait. They say they were just thinking about you. That's all. Nothing poetic. No thunder. Just coincidence. But is it? Is this real? Is this your moment? Or is this the potion? You don't know. You can't. And suddenly, you're back in the dream. The candlelight, the cup, the choice. Except now you're awake, and the stakes are higher. They ask if you want to walk. You do. Of course you do. So you do. Past the statues, past the gossiping. Matrons and lazy guards, past Rome's theater of illusions. And with every step you wonder, would they have asked if the bottle hadn't vanished? Would this conversation be happening without magic? And then, because life never lets you rest, they ask the one question you weren't ready for. Did you ever? Try one of those love potions? Their tone is light, joking, but something in their eyes says otherwise. You feel the heat rush. To your ears, the world narrows. You want to lie. But you also want to be worthy. Not of them, but of this moment, this truth. So you say, I thought about it. A pause. But I didn't use it. They nod. Don't ask more. Just say, good. Because I think I would have liked you anyway. And just like that, the city tilts. You don't know if it's true. You don't know if something was slipped into their wine, or if they found your vial, or if the gods simply decided you deserved a break. But you do know that this moment, real or not, feels like the reward for every lonely night and whispered name. You walk beside them, talking about nothing, letting the possibility of everything hang between you like perfume in hot air. Later, when you part ways, you find a note tucked into your pocket. Not from them, from someone else. Someone with sharp handwriting and no signature. It says, asterisk, the potion was never in the bottle. It was in the waiting. Asterisk, you don't sleep that night. Not because of fear, because you're full. With joy, maybe. With suspicion, definitely. But mostly with the realization that you no longer need the bottle. That you never did. That it was never about changing someone else. It was about daring to believe someone might already feel the same. And if they don't, you'll survive. Because the real magic isn't in a flask. It's in the bravery to show up anyway. You find yourself walking again, but this time it's not the streets pulling you. It's something older, quieter, stitched deep into the fabric of the city itself. Toward the Temple of Venus. Not the marble one the tourists talk about, all columns and clean lines, but the older shrine. The one half sunk into the earth like a broken tooth, wrapped in vines and the perfume of dead offerings. You don't remember choosing this route, but you're here now. And the closer you get, the more you feel it, not just the scent of incense and wax, but the weight of memory. Thousands of people have come here before you. Some with hope, others with desperation, all with names burning on their tongues. The ground around the shrine is littered with things that shouldn't survive: rain scraps of papyrus, twisted bits of jewelry, folded cloth, feathers, bones, offerings, pleas, spells, and above it all, a smell you can't quite name. Something like crushed roses and lightning. You step inside. The room isn't large. It breathes like an animal, warm, moist, and faintly alive. The statue of Venus stands at the back, taller than she needs to be. Arms chipped, eyes gone, mouth curved in an expression that says she's seen everything and regrets none of it. At her feet, bowls, some empty, some filled with things that shimmer or rot. You kneel not because you believe, but because standing feels too proud in a place like this. You place your hands on your knees. You don't speak. You just think. Hard. About the person you almost enchanted. About the way their voice sounds in your memory. About the moment they looked at you and didn't look away, and then something strange happens. A girl walks in, young, maybe 14. She moves with purpose, like she's done this before. She carries a small pouch, unwraps it carefully, and pours its contents, dried petals, bits of mirror, and a necklace charm, into a shallow bowl. She lights a stick of incense. It crackles, then settles. She closes her eyes and whispers something. You can't hear it. She opens her eyes. Sees you. Doesn't startle. Just nods. Yours is gone already, she says. Her voice is soft, but her gaze is steel. I saw it last night. Down by the baths. Someone found it. Didn't drink it. Just left it on a doorstep. And then it vanished. You want to ask how she knows, but you already know how. Rome talks, not loudly, but honestly, if you're willing to listen to the corners that she stands. Dusts off her tunic. You don't need it now, she says, and you almost believe her. You walk back out into the city, and everything feels sharper. The market noise stings your ears. The smell of grilled onions makes your stomach churn. And when someone bumps into you, your skin prickles like fire. You're changing. Whether from the idea of the potion or the absence of it, you don't know. But the edges are different now. Softer in places, harder in others. There's a saying in the Subura, the gods answer when you stop asking. You used to think it was cynical. Now it feels like warning and wisdom rolled into one. Because the truth is, you did ask, not with words, with action, with longing. And maybe that's what love spells really are, ways of asking without speaking. You carry something, prepare something, offer something, all in the hope that someone else will see the shape of your desire and not run. But what if they do? What if the moment you're honest, the person you want laughs or worse pities you? That's the terror these potions are meant to solve. They let you hide behind ritual. They give you the illusion of power when all you really want is permission to hope. You stop by a stall selling figs. The woman behind the counter smiles. Not seductively, just kindly. You look like you've been kissed by something risky, she says. You laugh. Close, you reply. Almost kissed by something bottled. She nods like she's heard that before. She probably has. You buy 2 figs. One for now, one for later. They're sweet, sticky, and soft enough to fall apart in your hands. Just like most good things. As you walk, you begin to notice things you hadn't before. The way lovers avoid each other's eyes in public. The way married couples touch less than strangers. The way desire lives in the margins, in the linger of a hand, the slant of a glance, the pause before a goodbye. Rome may legislate affection, but it can't police subtlety. And maybe that's the true playground of enchantment, not the spells, but the spaces between rules, the loopholes of longing. There's a bench near the edge of the market where old men play dice and pretend not to watch the world. You sit there, half in shadow, half in sun, and you realize this is the most honest you've ever been with yourself. You almost changed someone's feelings. You almost played God. But now, you'd rather be seen. Imperfect, wanting, real. If they love you, let it be without gloss. If they don't, at least the story's yours. Still you wonder. Not about the potion, about the girl in the shrine. Who told her? Who taught her? And how many more like her move through the city, carrying secrets disguised as errands, spells hidden in recipes, affection folded into offerings. Rome survives because of these people, the in-betweeners, the whisperers, The ones who know that love is never just about hearts, it's about timing, and fear, and the courage to be obvious in a world that prizes silence. You take the second fig from your bag. You don't eat it. You place it on the bench. A tiny offering, a thank you, to the city, to the gods, to whoever didn't drink your potion, but still looked at you like they might want a dot as the sun sets. You walk home slower. No need to rush. If love comes, it'll come like the fig sweet messy, and gone too soon. But oh, how good it tastes while it lasts. They say there was once a physician who swore he could tell the difference between medicine and magic by the smell alone. He walked the streets of Rome with a pouch of cloves in one hand and a sprig of rue in the other, claiming that any substance which masked its own bitterness must be hiding something else intent. His name was Marcellus, and people lined up at his door, not just for cures, but for clarity. Tell me, they begged, was I enchanted or just foolish? And Marcellus would sniff a strand of hair, a shirt collar, the rim of a cup, and tell them whether they had been tricked or worse, whether they had been in love without help at all. He was rarely wrong. But one day, he met a woman who made no requests. She came with a gifted jar of salve that smelled of cinnamon and crushed ivy. She said it was for his joints. He thanked her, used it, slept better than he had in years. 2 weeks later, he married her. When asked, he said she had cured him. But some whispered that the real cure wasn't in the jar, it was in the fact that, for once, Marcellus didn't want to know the truth. You're thinking of him now as you walk through the portico near the library, where the marble is colder than usual and the air feels like someone else's breath. You're thinking about how thin the line is between knowledge and surrender. How every potion seller, every healer, every charm weaver had to dance on that line. And how doctors, yes, even the most scientific ones, weren't always sure which side they stood on. Because medicine in Rome wasn't clean. It wasn't sterile. It was experimental, subjective, and above all, dependent on belief. Take a tincture of silphium and pepper, it could induce passion or reduce swelling. Depending on dosage, depending on need. And that's the irony, isn't it? The difference between a medicine and a love potion was never the ingredients. It was the intention. You step into the shade of a fig tree near a villa where you once delivered scrolls as a child. The house is empty now, its garden overgrown, its gate rusted, but you remember it clearly. The woman who lived there had blue ink stains on her fingers and a laugh that made your ribs ache. She taught you to read. She also taught you to identify herbs, which ones to chew for a headache, which ones to avoid when pregnant, which ones could make someone fall asleep so deeply you could whisper confessions into their ear and they'd wake thinking it was a dream. She never called herself a witch. She didn't need to. She called herself useful. And that's what scared the men who came for her in the night. Not her knowledge, her independence. Historians still debate whether women like her were healers, witches, or simply women who didn't ask for permission. The line is blurry for a reason. Because Rome wanted its women powerful enough to be mothers, soft enough to be lovers, and quiet enough to never need anything more. But love potions? They made women loud. Not with sound, but with presence. They dared to ask. Not out loud, but with jars and oils and slips of linen soaked in wine. You keep walking. Slower now, the rhythm of your steps matching your breath. You pass a temple guard eating olives from his palm, eyes half-lidded, probably drunk. You nod. He nods back. Neither of you speaks. In Rome, silence is its own form of intimacy. Just like scent. Just like dreams. That's why so many spells rely on smell and sleep. Because those are the two states when your guard is down. When logic loosens its grip. When suggestion seeps in and makes itself at home. There's one scroll, nearly burned during the Great Fire, that speaks of a dream draft popular among elite courtesans. The recipe is vague, some kind of barley infusion mixed with myrrh and oil from crushed orange blossoms. It didn't make you fall in love. It just made you dream about the person who gave it to you. Not always romantically. Sometimes they were rescuing you from fire. Sometimes they were feeding you grapes. Sometimes they were simply there, watching, comforting. And when you woke, you couldn't separate the dream from the desire. You craved their presence like sleep itself. That was the brilliance of it. Not coercion. Familiarity. You stop by a small fountain, shaped like a lion vomiting water into a cracked basin. Someone has placed a rose on its edge, fresh, absurdly red, clearly deliberate. You wonder who it was for. And then you wonder if someone is doing that for you, not because you're important, but because the city is full of invisible threads. Someone is always watching, wanting, hoping you'll see the offering before it wilts. And maybe that's the most dangerous thing about love potions. They work best when they're not needed. When the person drinking already suspects they want you. When all the potion does is tip the scale a single degree. That's what Rome feared. Not that people would be turned into fools, but that they'd discover they were fools all along. You think of the person again, the one you almost gave the potion to. Their smile. The way they reach for things without looking. The way they laugh with their whole body. You wonder if they're thinking of you now, not with urgency, just with recognition. A tug in the chest that doesn't quite hurt, but doesn't quite go away. And maybe, just maybe, they're walking through the city too, asking themselves if what they feel is real or planted. You sit down finally on a low wall beneath the fig tree. The fruit is ripe now. The air is thick with it. And your hands smell like dust and sweetness. You close your eyes. You imagine opening the vial, not to use it, just to see. But it's gone, of course, stolen or saved, lost or lifted. You'll never know. And maybe that's the point. Because in the end, the question isn't did the potion work, it's did you need it to? And as the wind shifts, carrying the scent of rosemary and old dreams, you realize the answer has always been no. But oh, how tempting it was to say yes. You've been warned about many things in this city: corrupt senators, overpriced figs, cursed statues that whisper if you sleep beside them. But no one ever warned you about the wax dolls under the bed of a centurion. It's late afternoon. When you find them, tucked into a bundle of linen while visiting your cousin who serves in the 5th Legion. You were just looking for a blanket, maybe something dry, when your hand grazed the wax. It was soft, warm, almost human. You pulled back the cloth and found 2 figures, crudely shaped, their faces etched with lines that suggest laughter or longing or both. One was pierced through the chest with a thorn. The other was tied at the ankles with red thread, the knots pulsing slightly in the sunbeam like the string remembered blood. Beneath them, a scroll, short, direct. May he burn when I am far. May he ache when I am near. No signature. Just a smear of sandalwood oil and the unmistakable grit of ground. Amber clinging to the wax dot. Your cousin didn't flinch when you asked. Just grunted and said, "It's for discipline." As if that explained anything. As if conjuring someone's lust from 3 provinces away was no more unnatural than shining a helmet. He told you, half joking, that most soldiers had them. Not for the battlefield, for the waiting. For the silence that gets inside your ribs during the night watch. For the nights when letters don't arrive and your body forgets how it feels to be wanted. It's not about them, he said. It's about not losing yourself. Then he packed the dolls back under the bed, as casually as if they were spare sandals. And suddenly you understood. These weren't just spells, they were survival mechanisms. The military had rules, codes, ranks, but it didn't account for loneliness, and so the soldiers made their own rituals. Some sang. Some carved the names of lovers into their shields. Some visited brothels and paid extra just to be held. And some whispered enchantments into wax. hoping that someone far away would feel it. Not pain, just presence. You walk through the barracks, now past men cleaning weapons, mending boots, laughing in the way men do when they've convinced themselves they're not bleeding inside. There's an energy here, half defiance, half grief. And you wonder how many charms are buried in the dirt under these tents. How many whispered names have been sewn into tunics, pressed into coins, buried with letters. Love doesn't disappear during war. It mutates, becomes quiet, becomes desperate, and sometimes becomes dangerous. One centurion, famous, respected, the kind of man whose stare can silence a room, was found weeping last winter, alone, clutching a vial. No one spoke of it, but the camp knew. The next day, he beat a man half to death for speaking too loudly during drill. They said he'd been sent a charm by a woman he left behind, something to make him remember her between the violence. But it had worked too well. He remembered everything, her voice, her breath, the way she hummed while folding tunics. And suddenly, the war didn't make sense anymore. The orders felt like noise. That's what they feared. Not magic. Meaning, Rome was terrified of anything that made its soldiers feel. Because feelings get in the way. They make you hesitate before striking. Make you look at a face and see a story instead of a target. That's why the military eventually banned all sentimental contraband. No letters, no charms, no objects tied to specific people. And yet, every time a soldier fell, someone found a name carved into their armor. A name whispered with their last breath. A name, not an order. You reach the edge of the training field. Watch the men throw javelins, wrestle, sweat. You notice one young recruit rub something behind his ear before each round. You can smell it even from here: cinnamon and clove. Probably something a sibling gave him, or a lover, or someone he wishes was either. You don't ask. You just watch. Because in this city, the most honest expressions of love are the ones no one dares to explain. Later, back in the city, you pass a temple where prayers for returning soldiers are written in wax and pressed into clay. Not formal inscriptions, just initials, drawings, the occasional full plea. Let him remember me. Let him return whole. These aren't spells. But they aren't not spells either. They carry the same weight, the same longing, the same belief that names hold power if repeated often enough. You sit on the temple steps, watching as people come and go. An older woman carrying a tray of olive oil. A child dragging a broken doll. A man who lights a candle, then blows it out immediately, like he's changed his mind. You wonder how many of them have cast a love spell. Not with herbs or wax, but with glances, with shared bread. With the act of waiting and then it hits you. This isn't about the potion anymore. It never was. It was about needing proof that love wasn't a weakness, that wanting someone could be sacred. That desperation didn't have to be shameful. Rome didn't outlaw love potions because they caused harm. Rome outlawed them because they made people believe in possibility outside of power. You think of the wax dolls again. The way they curled against each other. The tenderness of the script. The effort someone took to make them, not to control, but to remember. And maybe that's what spells are: reminders, anchors, things that tether us to the idea that love can reach across absence, across silence, across war. You walk home differently now. Not lighter, not heavier, just truer. You know more. About people, about loneliness, about the ways we keep each other alive, even when we're not supposed to. You reach your door. And though the vial is still gone, you no longer feel empty. You feel connected to something old, to something honest. And if one day, someone finds a doll under your bed with your name etched into its chest, you hope they understand. It wasn't manipulation. It was memory. It was love, preserved. There's a gate at the edge of the Celian hill that barely opens now. Rust welded into its hinges. ivy choking its iron like old hands refusing to let go. Behind it sits a house the city forgot, stone faded to the color of old teeth, windows blinked shut with grime, and an air about it like a breath held too long. This is where the girl lived, the one who wouldn't love. Her name was Calvia, daughter of a grain magnate, born with cheekbones sharp enough to cut through conversation, and a silence so steady it made people nervous. She had suitors, of course lined up like statues in her family's atrium, bearing gifts and intentions. But she never said yes, never said no, either. Just watched, measured, calculated with eyes the color of bruised grapes and a mouth that never bent to expectation. And then, one day, a senator's son, Lucanus, made the mistake of saying aloud what everyone else had whispered. She needs a little help. Something to soften her, something old-fashioned. And like that, the wheels turned. He sought out a potion, not one to make her fall in love, but one to make her capable of it. As if refusal were a disease, as if indifference were unnatural. He bought it from a woman known as Fausta, who specialized in alignment tonics, blends meant to make the heart more agreeable. He slipped it into Calvia's wine during a feast, and she drank it, all of it, then looked him in the eye and said, "You've just made a mistake that history will enjoy repeating." What happened next unfolded like a tragedy staged in slow motion. First, her father accused her of disobedience after all. A woman who rejects marriage shamas her house. Then Lucanus admitted, half proud, that he had only tried to help. He meant well. He always meant well. But the law didn't see it that way. Calvia didn't cry, didn't faint, just stood there, listening as the Senate debated whether she'd been enchanted or had cast a spell of resistance herself. Because in Rome, a woman who said no and meant it, that was the real sorcery. Not magic, but autonomy. And Rome didn't like autonomy unless it came with a sword. She wasn't executed. That would have been too loud. Instead, she was placed under what they called emotional custody, assigned a companion, a minder, someone to record her words and moods, to track her smile-to-silence ratio. She lived in her family's house, but not freely. And Lucanus? He was fined, briefly exiled, then welcomed back after a year with a banquet and applause. The official records say he made a mistake in manners. The unofficial scrolls say he learned to keep the bottles for women who couldn't speak. You hear her story in whispers around baths and kitchens, where people lower their voices when they say her name. Some call her a saint, others a monster. But everyone agrees she never married, never smiled, and never let anyone touch her again. As you walk past her house, now rotting and swallowed by weeds, you wonder if she left anything behind. Notes, charms, dreams carved into wood. Maybe she kept a vial too once. Maybe she never used it. Or maybe she brewed her own, a potion of forgetting, of severing. Because not all magic is about pulling others closer. Some of it is about pushing the world back. You sit on the wall across from her gate. The bricks cool beneath you, and watch the windows for movement that never comes. It's quiet here. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of memory. Every stone holds her story like a secret it won't release. And suddenly, you're thinking about your own choices. How many times you've held back what you felt. Not because you didn't feel it, but because you were afraid it wouldn't be returned. Because wanting someone who doesn't want you back, that's the kind of wound that doesn't scab. That just stays raw. That's why people reach for spells. Not to force love, but to protect themselves from the echo of no. Rome punished women like Calvia not because they were cold, but because they reminded men that desire isn't always mutual. That consent is not a given. That affection isn't currency. And so, the city built stories around these women. Painted them as tragic, cursed, unnatural. Anything to avoid admitting that sometimes love just doesn't happen. And that has to be enough. You leave the hill slowly. Footsteps echoing in the narrow streets, the sky starting to bruise with twilight. You pass a couple arguing low, fierce words, and a vendor lighting candles one by one, her hands shaking only slightly. Everyone's pretending to be okay. Rome is very good at that. You think of Calvia one more time before bed. You light a lamp and leave it by your window, just in case stories like hers still need a signal. Just in case someone walks by who understands that sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one that protects your own boundaries. And if that's a kind of magic, then so be it. They say the last true Roman sorceress didn't curse her enemies. She blessed her lovers. Not with obedience or obsession, but with closure. Her name was Marcia, though some whispered it wasn't her real one. She lived in the edge shadows of Aventine, where the buildings hunch together like old secrets, and the air always smells faintly of figs gone soft. Her doorway was marked with red chalk, subtle, elegant, the kind of sign only those who needed her could recognize. And her trade was not seduction, it was release. Women came to her not to win hearts, but to let go of them. A man who forgot them, a girl who left without answers, a husband who died in another woman's bed. Marcia offered them something no Roman law could, a ritual that turned heartbreak into history. You think of her now as you descend into the part of the city where light always feels borrowed. Someone told you her story last night after too much watered wine and not enough silence. They claimed to know someone who had been her final client. A young man, barely 17, in love with a gladiator who never remembered his name. Every time he visited the arena, the gladiator would smile, wave, toss him a token, but nothing more. Never spoke to him. Never asked. The boy became consumed. He stopped eating. Started collecting things, sand from the arena floor, feathers the gladiator wore during festivals, even sweat-soaked cloth discarded in the locker rooms. Eventually, he went to Marcia. He didn't ask for love. He asked to forget. She gave him a small bottle, black glass, no label. Told him to open it at sunset and breathe deeply. That night, the boy climbed a hill, uncorked the bottle, and waited. What he smelled wasn't anything ordinary. Not flowers. Not spices. Something colder. Like snow that never touched the ground. He cried, fell asleep. Woke up the next morning and couldn't remember the gladiator's name. You don't know if the story is true. But you know this. Every love story in Rome that ends badly becomes a ghost. And Marcia, they say, made sure those ghosts stayed buried. Her arrest came quietly. No spectacle, no Senate announcement. Just one morning, her door was found unmarked, and inside, only dust. They say she was betrayed by a client whose spell didn't work fast enough. They say the guards found dozens of bottles, some empty, some still humming with unsaid names. They say she didn't run, that she sat on her stool and smiled. I never forced anyone to love, she told the captain. I just helped them stop lying to themselves. The court couldn't charge her with murder, so they charged her with interfering in the divine order. A rare ancient law meant to stop mortals from manipulating divine intention. She was sent away, some say to exile. Others say to a monastery where she taught young girls to read. Still others believe she never existed at all. That she was invented by people who needed to believe in a cure. You walk through the alley where her shop used to be. The chalk mark is gone, but the wall still has a crack shaped like a crescent moon. You press your fingers to it, cold, solid, unmoving, like truth. Or resignation. That's the part no one tells you about love potions. About all magic, really. It doesn't always give you what you want. Sometimes it gives you what you need, and you don't realize it until later. Sometimes the spell isn't in the bottle. It's in the decision to stop chasing someone who walks away. That's its own kind of enchantment. You reach the forum. Watch as two lovers argue in public, loud, theatrical, perfectly Roman. A woman slaps a man. He laughs. She storms off. A bystander leans over and says, "They'll be married by Saturnalia." You smile, not because it's romantic, because it's familiar, because it's how this city breathes through drama, performance, masks. And beneath all of it, desire. Raw and unfiltered. You sit at the edge of a fountain, close your eyes. Think about all the names you've collected, people you've wanted, people who wanted you, people you let go of before they could leave. And suddenly, you want to find Marcia, not to ask for a spell, but to thank her for reminding people that letting go is not weakness. That forgetting is sometimes an act of survival. That love doesn't always end in embrace. Sometimes it ends with a deep breath and a quiet step forward. You remember one more story, your favorite maybe, of a soldier who carried a tiny locket, filled with nothing, just air. He told people it was a charm from a woman he once loved. But really, it was a reminder to stay hollow, to stay light. There's power in carrying nothing, he said. No weight, no wish. Just the memory of possibility. You never understood that before. But now you do. You leave the forum slowly. The sun is setting, and the city is casting long shadows shaped like regrets. And in that golden light, you feel it somewhere inside you. Something has shifted. Not vanished, not healed, just softened. Like wax under the right flame. Like memory under time. And maybe that's the most potent spell of all. To feel everything and still walk forward. There's a moment just before night falls fully over Rome, when the sky forgets how to choose a color. Not purple, not blue, not black. Something in between. Something uncertain. That's where you are now. Standing at the edge of a bridge. That doesn't even have a name. Watching the Tiber slide beneath your feet like a rumor no one can prove. You've walked all day, retracing stories and whispers, spells and silences. And now, at the end of it all, you find yourself here, with nothing in your hands but the memory of a bottle that never got used, and the echo of a name you don't need to whisper anymore. This is when the questions come. Not the loud ones, the quiet ones. Did you really want them to love you? Or did you want to be chosen, just once, without having to ask? Did you almost use the potion because you were lonely, or because you were afraid of being ordinary? Did it matter that much what their eyes said, or was it about what your reflection stopped saying when you looked at yourself in still water? The truth hurts softly, like new sandals or an honest friend. Because here's the secret every spell tries to hide. You were never powerless. Just afraid to use the power you already had. You remember every single tale you followed. The girl who sewed longing into tunics. The centurion who kept wax dolls beside his blade. The mother who wrote love prayers, not for herself, but for the future lovers of her sons. And you realize they were all doing the same thing, trying to make meaning stick. Trying to slow down the speed at which affection slips through our fingers. Trying to say, I was here, I felt something. Please don't pretend it didn't matter. You walk slowly now. Past fountains, past fig vendors closing up. Past temples flickering with final candles. Rome is quieting. Not sleeping. Rome never truly sleeps, but breathing deeper. You catch a whiff of thyme and honey, and it reminds you of the time someone said your name like a question, and never stayed to hear the answer. That's what love does here. It leaves traces, smells, glances, unsent letters. Bottles tucked into robes, unopened, but full of trembling. And then you see it. On the doorstep of your building. Right where the cats sleep during the day and drunk lovers carve promises at night. Sits a small glass bottle. Familiar. Whole. The ribbon is new. Not gold this time, violet. Royal and quiet. You kneel. Pick it up. It's warm. There's no note. No seal. Just the faintest scent of something you once dreamed but never named. You don't know who left it. You don't ask. Because you know now, it doesn't matter. You bring it inside. Place it on the table. Light a single candle beside it. You sit. You look at it. And you realize the decision was never about whether to use it. It was always about what it meant that you even considered it. You could open it now. Pour it into tea. Whisper their name and hope. Or you could write your own spell. Not for them. For yourself. Say you do. Not in Latin. Not in any formal tongue. Just in thoughts. In breath, I release the hunger to be proven lovable. I release the fantasy that love must arrive shaped like desire. I release the shame of wanting what I didn't receive. I name myself worthy without magic, and I remember how to begin again. It's not dramatic. There's no thunder. The bottle doesn't glow, but you feel better. And that's enough. You blow out the candle. Climb into bed. Pull the blanket close. And for the first time in a long while, your dreams are quiet. End of script. Sweet dreams.